Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, leading the country's most right-wing government ever, pledged on to press ahead with policies that have irked critics back at home and also abroad. One such policy is the overhaul of the country's judicial system, which can potentially weaken the Supreme Court. In a speech in Jerusalem, Netanyahu appeared to back his Justice Minister, Levin. Netanyahu vowed to implement reforms that will ensure the proper balance between the three branches of the government.
נעשה רוויזיה במשילות. קיבלנו מנדט מובהק מהציבור בהקשר זה, להיאבק בפורעי חוק, ונעשה זאת בלא מורא. ננקוט צעדים שיחזקו את הביטחון האישי בכל רחבי המדינה, ואני אתן גיבוי ככל שדרוש להשיג את היעד הזה. בד בבד נחיל רפורמות שיבטיחו את האיזון הנכון בין שלוש הרשויות.
Netanyahu spoke shortly after Levin unveiled the new government's long-promised overhaul of the judicial system. The proposals call for a series of sweeping changes aimed at curbing the powers of the judiciary. Now, these include allowing lawmakers to pass laws that the High Court has struck down and effectively deemed unconstitutional. Now, Levin also proposed that politicians play a greater role in the appointment of Supreme Court judges and that ministers appoint their own legal advisors instead of using independent professionals. The new Justice Minister also laid out a law that would empower Israel's 120-member parliament to override Supreme Court's decisions with a simple majority of 61 votes. Critics accuse the government of declaring a war against the legal system. They say the plan will upend Israel's system of checks and balances and also undermine its democratic institutions, as it gives absolute powers to the government. Justice Minister is a long-time critic of the Supreme Court. He presented his plan a day before the justices are to debate a controversial new law passed by the government. The new legislation allows a politician convicted of tax offences to serve as a cabinet minister. Since being indicted on corruption charges, Netanyahu has campaigned against the justice system. He denies all charges and presents himself as the victim of a witch hunt, orchestrated by a hostile media, police, and also the prosecutors. Now, Levin has said that his plan is not connected in any way to Netanyahu's trial. Now, for more on this, our correspondent Jody Cohen is joining us live from Renana. Welcome to the broadcast, Jody. Now, government's proposal for judicial reform is being seen as extremely controversial. Just days after swearing in, this comes, and how is the Netanyahu government reacting to the fallout?
Well, I don't think that they would be surprised by the controversy and the opposition to these plans. They were made known in advance. The opposition has been talking about them even during the campaign. So I don't think it would come as a surprise. What's interesting today is that the High Court is convening to hear petitions on the appointment of Shas leader Aryeh Deri as a government minister. Now, remember, he's the Interior and the Health Minister in the new government, and there's opposition to his appointment because he has been convicted of tax offences, most recently in 2022, just under a year ago, convicted of tax fraud with a suspended sentence. Now, the government last week passed a bill saying that anyone can be a minister if they've been given a suspended sentence. And this law is seen as being designed to enable Deri to become a minister. And remember that Shas had demanded this bill as part of joining the coalition government. So it has big implications for the actual makeup of the government today. Now, a petition from the Movement for Quality Government and others say that Deri's appointment is unreasonable. And in a rare move, the Attorney General, Baharav Miara, has also come out against the appointment. The government has now filed a legal response to the High Court, saying that this is the only way to bring about government stability after 5 elections in 4 years. is to appoint the Shas leader as a minister. So today's proceedings do have implications for the ability of the new government to govern, and also come at a critical time regarding the balance of power, as you said, between the courts, the government and parliament.
All right, Jody, we will be tracking, of course, as and when the Supreme Court reconvenes for this. But I want to come back to the judicial reform that has been proposed by the government. It is being called that it is undermining democratic institution and it gives absolute power to the government. I want to ask you, is there anything the opposition or anybody inside the country that can change this judicial reform in any way?
So this has been very controversial. The opposition are calling it anti-democratic. Lapid has gone so far as to say that the government is a gang of criminals, and he's saying that he'll cancel any changes when he comes back into power. And I think that's the key point. I don't see the law being able to be stopped because the government support this and the government has a majority. But Lapid is saying when he comes into power next, if he comes into power again, he would reverse those changes. And the government, of course, is saying that these changes make Israel more democratic by giving more weight to the Knesset. It's reflecting the will of the people. Some legal experts are calling for a sort of a halfway house, agreeing that there needs to be a rebalance between the power of the courts and the power of the parliament, but saying that there should be a supermajority and not just a simple majority for the parliament to be able to overturn any court rulings. Now, of course, the question is also being asked here, will these changes mean that legislation can be passed that the courts then can't override? That could help Netanyahu end his legal troubles. Remember, he's being investigated for alleged bribery, fraud and breach of trust, which he denies. Lapid has also talked about the timing of this announcement of the government's judicial plans, which he calls not a reform, but a threat to destroy the entire constitutional structure of Israel. He said that the timing is to exert influence over today's hearings on the Derry case. And many commentators are arguing that this is arguably the biggest changes that we could potentially be seeing ever to Israel's system of government.
All right. Thank you for all those insights. That was our correspondent Jody Quinn reporting live from Renana.
Thank you.